I'm Jian COF. So as many of you know, the famous Olympic gold medal winning athlete Bruce Jenner officially became Caitlyn Jenner in the year 2015. For those of you who aren't aware, Bruce Jenner didn't only win a gold medal, but he also set a new world record for the decathlon, scoring 8,618 points in 1976 at the Montreal Games. Now imagine if Bruce Jenner decided to undergo transgender surgery back in the 1970s or 80s and chose to compete as a female with other female athletes, which brings me to my topic of transgender athletes competing in any form of competitive sports. The proposition I am trying to defend is that transgender athletes gain a significant advantage in competitive sports. My supporting claims are: 1, strength and physical dexterity are unaffected by most of the transgender procedures. 2, transgender women invading a sport that only women can compete in results in athletes who have a much greater advantage to win. And 3, transgender athletes have access to substances banned under sporting rules. My first point, which is strength and physical dexterity are unaffected by most of the transgender procedures. When an individual undergoes or chooses to change his or her gender, that person still possesses certain biological qualities of the sex that they were assigned with during birth. In general, men have longer and larger bones, which gives them mechanical advantages over women, since they have greater leverage, increased height, and larger frames to support muscle. Men are also less prone to injury because their bones are denser and have tougher ligaments. According to Chris Schwerian from Ohio University Biological Science Department, the main reason for the gap in statistics between male and female athletes is men's higher aerobic capacity, which is due to them typically having less body fat, more muscle mass, and larger hearts and lungs than women. Men on average have greater muscle mass, and a larger proportion of it is fast twitch, which allows them to generate greater force, speed, and energy for higher intensity exercises. My second supporting claim is that transgender women invading a sport that only women can compete in results in other athletes having a disadvantage to win. Essentially, women who were once men are competing with biological females, which gives them greater odds to win. For example, transgender weightlifter Laurel Hubbard, who was born a man, won the Australian International Women's Competition on March 19, 2017. Laurel Hubbard, who is 39, lifted 591 pounds, which is nearly 20 pounds over or more than the woman who won the silver medal by lifting 572 pounds. Transgender women competing with biological women are can also be dangerous to female athletes. For example, transgender MMA fighter Fallon Fox TKO'd Tamika Brents at only 2 minutes and 17 seconds during the first round of their match. Fallon Fox gave Brents a concussion and broke her eye socket. During an interview to WOA TV, Brents said, "I've never felt so overpowered in my life. I am an abnormally strong female in my own right, and I could usually move around in the clinch against females, but couldn't move at all in Fox's clinch." So there is a reason why there are different standards for male and female sports. The base distances for the MLB, Major League Baseball, is 90 feet. And the NPF, which is the National Pro Fast Pitch, which is softball for women, have base distances of 60 feet. The regulation WNBA ball is 28.5 inches, which is 1 inch smaller than the NBA ball. And the average yardage for the Ladies Professional Golf Association is between 6,200 and 6,600 yards, where the average yardage for the PGA is 7,000 yards. The reason for these different standards is because sport parameters are based on men's and women's specific physical attributes. My third point, transgender athletes have access to substances banned under sporting rules. In the women to male situation, transgender males are also gaining an advantage in competitive sports. Mac Beggs, a 17-year-old junior at Euless Trinity in Texas, is taking testosterone to transition from male to female. On February 20th, 2017, he won the girls wrestling championship, which occurred 11 days after a lawsuit was filed against the UIL, which is the University Interscholastic League, asking the organization to suspend Beggs for his use of the banned steroid. Mac Beggs wants to wrestle with boys, but is not allowed to because of UIL rules, which states that athletes must compete under the gender on their birth certificates. Because of Beggs' use of testosterone, the transgender athlete gains an advantage over the female athletes. Beggs is allowed to, by the UIL, to take testosterone, which is permitted in certain medical cases by the governing body of public school wrestling in Texas. In conclusion, I hope these 3 points have persuaded you all that transgender athletes gain a significant advantage in competitive sports.
All right, the proposition's clearly stated. There's an excellent preview of what the supporting points are. They're all written as claims and they're presented as claims, so you're doing the exact right thing there. It's easy to follow. You give explanations on the individual points. I thought that that was pretty effective. The evidence that you have is okay. You've got some good examples that you can point to, especially when you were talking about particular athletes and the advantages that they gain. I thought that that was pretty good. There's some factual data on the first point that could probably use a source citation, but you do follow up with some other information about like their aerobic capacity and their muscle mass. I do think you need to show us that there isn't a change in some of those things when people are undergoing the transgender process that is altering their status. You kind of take it as a given, and I don't know if people lose muscle mass or they probably are not going to lose their bone structure, but there might be issues concerning muscle mass that are affected by some of the things that they're taking. Although on the last point, you had a good example of that, suggesting that it actually has the opposite effect because of the chemicals that they're taking. So that would, I think, also tend to support that first point that you had. Like I said, on the second point, you had good examples to illustrate the particular point. I like the piece of testimony that you had from the MMA fighter who got beat up by Fox. I thought that was you got an expert insight from experience there that is an interesting perspective that demonstrates that there is in fact a perceived difference or a noticeable difference in these athletes, and I thought that that was pretty effective there. And then on the last point, you've got a single example on this. It would be nice to be able to generalize a little bit wider, but you've got this one example about the case down in Texas where because they're going through a transgender process, they are given an exemption on the substance, and the substance does have an effect on their performance. And I thought that's a good example. It's under the Texas rules. I think we need to know, are those rules all their places, that sort of thing. Do they even have rules about those kinds of things in some of the sports that you're talking about? That might broaden it a little bit more. But I thought generally you did a good job supporting the argument you're making. Thank you. Sabrina.